Welcome to This Week in Sports with DeAngelo Richardson. DeAngelo Richardson is a personal trainer, fitness influencer, and athlete. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of sports. Each week, DeAngelo will break down and explain some of the most important stories of the week in sports, from basketball, football, and soccer to hockey, baseball, and sports during the pandemic. Be in Dino now. I'm Dave Liss, D's sidekick. This week, D will give updates on the LA Dodgers World Series win and COVID positive player Justin Turner's team participation, NFL players coming back from COVID, and an update on the latest in NFL and college football. Updates on world soccer and soccer player Marcus Rashford and what he's doing to help kids. And will DeAngelo be going back to the gym anytime soon? He'll let you know why and when. How did the LA Dodgers come to win the World Series, and what was the LA Dodgers athlete Justin Turner doing on the field after they won the series?
All right. Thanks, Dave. So, how they won the series? Because they were the better team. So, that's not super insightful. That's nothing you can get anywhere else. That's because they were the better team all year. Even in the shortened season, they were the best team. They had the deepest roster. They had the best pitching. They had the best hitters. That's all it was. It was an entertaining series. They won in 6 games. Corey Seager was the World Series MVP, and then obviously one of the greatest pitchers of all time, Clayton Kershaw, got his ring finally. So it solidifies his career because that's what was missing on his resume. But that's not what I want to talk about. That's not what interests me about the World Series. What interested me was the ending of the World Series when, in the middle of Game 6, Justin Turner for somehow they got the results in the middle of Game 6 that he tested positive for COVID, and they had to pull him from the game. And they had Rod Manfred, who was the commissioner for the MLB. He got a call that Turner tested positive. He called the Dodgers and had Justin Turner get off the field, in which they did. They did that. And so they finished the game. The Dodgers, of course, went on to win the World Series that night. And so while Turner was told to stay in the back, obviously with his excitement and then win the series, he came out, no mask, celebrated with the team, hugging everybody, kissing his wife, and taking team pictures right in front with no mask. And it's just a bad look because you have to think about what would have happened if the Dodgers would have lost that game. Forget the celebration stuff. If they lost that game, it would have been a Game 7. It would have been Game 7, which is supposed to be the next day. But if Turner tested positive, and because of the MLB protocols, there's a good chance that Game 7 would have been delayed for 2 weeks, which would have been a disaster. At least 2 weeks anyway. Would have been a disaster for the MLB and for the soft bubble that they had, because during the season they had teams playing their home markets. When they got to the playoffs, they did soft bubble, so they had like 2 or 3 cities that the majority of the playoff games were played, and then they had the World Series in a neutral location in Texas. And again, it was a soft bubble, so friend or family could kind of come in and out of the bubble. So there's different ways that he could have caught it. And honestly, it was kind of stunning that the MLB did that well to get all the playoff games in. But if the Dodgers would have lost Game 6, with Turner testing positive in the middle of Game 6, and who knows how many other people would have tested positive, and what would happen if there was no Game 7 or if they had to push back Game 7, it could have been a disaster. It's something we'll never know because they ended up winning, and people are going to forget about it. But that's what interested me. And it could have been way worse than it turned out to be. So that's all I have to say about that. That's what interested me. So congrats on the Dodgers. I'm happy you guys won. Good for you guys. But that wasn't what interested me. Justin Turner, jeez. All right. What's the next thing, Dave?
What's the latest in the NFL? What players are coming back from COVID? Excuse me. Are you surprised how well some teams are doing and how far some teams have fallen?
So this is something that has interested me because we even now, we don't know much about the virus and its long-term effects, right? Right, at first it was like, okay, if you get it, are you going to die? And if you don't die, then are you all good? We're starting to learn that that's not the case. Just because you survive it doesn't mean you won't have lasting effects of it. You've heard people who've had trouble with breathing issues, lung capacity issues, some heart issue stuff, that have been lingering since they got the virus. And so to bring that to the NFL, obviously the NFL, because just the nature of how big the teams are and how much staff is there, the nature of trying to do a bubble like the NBA or the NHL did, or even a soft bubble like the MLB did during the playoffs is just not feasible. It's just not. There's not enough places to put them. So teams have had to put in or the NFL had to put in strict protocols, and teams have had to enforce those protocols. That when you're not in the facility, you have to, basically stay home. Wear a contact tracer so we know who you've been in contact with if you so happen to get the virus. And so there's a lot of steps they've been doing to kind of protect players. But even then, no matter what, this virus is very contagious. People are going to get it. So take that to the field. I'm thinking of two people in particular. Cam Newton, who is the quarterback for the New England Patriots, and Ezekiel Elliott, who is the running back for the Dallas Cowboys. They both had COVID earlier in the season. Or Ezekiel Elliott had it before the season. Cam Newton got it after like week 2 or week 3 or something like that. So I'm looking at Cam Newton. And I have to be careful here because he's had a lot of physical injuries that could be explaining his performance. But I think it's interesting to note that his first 2 games of the season, he looked as good as he's ever looked. When he won MVP back in 2015, he looked that good. And then obviously over the last few years, he's had shoulder issues and a foot issue. All that plays into his decline. But those first 2 games of the season, he was as the best he's ever been. He gets diagnosed with COVID, so he has to miss a game or 2. He comes back, and he's been statistically one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And the only difference is that he came back from COVID. It could be that he didn't practice for a while and he's trying to get his rhythm back. It could be his injuries caught up with him after a few weeks. It could be all of that. But I think it's worth asking if COVID has something to do with that. With Ezekiel Elliott, he had it before the season started. But the biggest thing with him is that he was one of the more sure-handed running backs in the NFL and one of the best blocking running backs in the NFL. So he could block when he needed to. He never fumbled the ball. The first few games of the season, he's missed so many blocks that he usually gets. And a lot of that can be, one thing you hear about COVID is like people have fog brain. So you wonder, okay, I wonder if it's like maybe the fog brain from COVID that may be affecting him and he's just not all the way there. If he's not paying attention to little details of how he's supposed to carry the ball and he loses the ball too easily. It's all just speculative because you can't know for sure, but I think it's worth asking how the play has declined. And then the biggest thing before I move on is this guy that even diehard fans don't really know about, Raquel Armstead of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He got diagnosed with COVID and he's been hospitalized twice. And now they ruled him out of the season. So he's not a big name, so it's not getting a bunch of headlines. But if he was like Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, and he was hospitalized he's not once but twice for COVID, and he was out for the season, this news will be everywhere, and then there'll be real consideration if they should even be playing the games. So I think we have to keep track of that and at least ask the questions. Again, it's too early to know any long-term effects, but I think exploring that is something that we all should be doing. So that's all I have to say about that. And that leads us into college. So go ahead, Dave.
That's fascinating. Has resuming college football been a good idea? How are teams and conferences doing?
So, is it a good idea? I think if you ask me, I would say no. But I understand why they felt they needed to do it. For money reasons, for giving the kids something to do. But let's be honest, it's been kind of a crap show in college football. There's been so many canceled games or postponed games in all conferences and all walks of life. There's been like teams, Division 1 teams who have just outright canceled their season. Um, and the tough thing with college is that, you know, one person gets it because these players are all like together all the time. If one person gets it, then everyone that's around them in the position group has to be quarantined and out as well. And each conference there's different conferences in college sports, and so in college football, different conferences have their own particular rules about what happens with COVID testing and COVID protocols. But for example, I want to talk about the Big Ten in particular because the Big Ten was probably the first to say we're not going to play it, or no, I should say the Pac-12. The Pac-12 was the first to say they're not going to play it, but the Big Ten fell right in line saying they're not going to play, and then obviously things changed course and they ended up having a season, but a shortened season where they only could play 6 regular season games, and all these games were going to be back to back with no breaks in between because they had to match up with the end of the other conferences playing their games so that the Big Ten could be eligible for the football playoff and potentially the national championship. So what happens with this? So I'll talk specifically about the Big Ten. It started 2 weeks ago. Wisconsin played their first game, and then right after the game, they got diagnosed with 12 positive tests last week, which caused them to miss and cancel the game against Nebraska, a game that cannot be not be rescheduled because there's no breaks in the schedule to move them. There's no way they can play that game. So that's done. And then coming this week, they were supposed to play Purdue, but Wisconsin's cases rose to 27. So they're forced to cancel the Purdue game. And so with 2 canceled games, Wisconsin is now teetering on the brink of not being able to play or compete in the Big Ten championship and potentially the college football playoff and national championship. Because again, that team has to play at least 6 games to be eligible, and there's only 8 weeks in the schedule. There's 2 weeks already done, so Wisconsin has to be perfect for the rest of the year, which is probably unlikely for them to even potentially get a chance to play in the Big Ten championship and college football playoff. So if we're asking if it was worth it for Wisconsin, I bet you right now they're on the brink of saying probably not. And that's the biggest story because it's one of the bigger teams in college football. But this is all over the place. These college kids are being put at risk. They're not getting paid for it, which, there's debate whether they should or not. But I feel like they should. They're not getting paid for it. They're putting themselves at risk for long-term effects, just for a few games for people to get their money's worth in the football season. And I don't know. As much as I love football, I have a problem with that. And so if you ask me again if it was a good idea, going back to the first question, I would say probably not. But here we are.
We are where we
Yep.
are. What do you think are the top underreported stories? Excuse me. Are the top underreported stories in sports this week?
So there's a couple. I want to talk first about women's sports right now, because one big thing over COVID and especially with the social justice movements over the summer and the NBA and to some degree the MLB and NHL kind of standing for against injustices. There's a certain side of people, certain section, I won't call them out, who will say that, hey, there's ratings declines because people don't want politics or whatever in their sports. And, they don't take into account that, for one, most people we're in an election cycle, so most people are not paying attention to sports. Most of the sports are being played right now, especially when NBA was playing, were off kilter because you're not expecting NBA in the fall season, and especially when you got football happening. Also, people are just not watching TV as much. They're off cable. They're watching through streaming sites and all that kind of stuff. So going by TV ratings to make your point, I think was a little, they had their agenda. You know what they're trying to do. I don't need to talk about that. That's not what we're here for. But what I wanted to give credit to was with the talk of declining ratings with sports, there's a couple sports that have been on the rise, and that is the NWSL, which is the National Women's Soccer League in the USA, and the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. Both have saw a drastic increase. WNBA, a 27% increase in their last game of the season, their championship game, in comparison to last year. And the NWSL, a staggering 500% increase of ratings this year compared to last. And for the NWSL, that's more so just because they got to cable instead of just being an off streaming site. But still, people were watching for a reason. They were the first U.S. League to come back, and they set a blueprint for how to set up a bubble for the NBA and MLB or NHL, excuse me. I think that deserves a lot of credit that women's sports have been on the rise. People are watching them. People are fans of them. People support them. People are sponsoring these sports now. So when you get sponsors, guess what's going to happen? The sponsors are going to push you. And so you're seeing more promotion for these leagues everywhere. And I think that's just a good thing. I think that's a positive. I think women's sports, women's athletes are so underappreciated, and I think them getting their due is needed. So that's the good thing. Another great thing that I want to end with this was Marcus Rashford. So a lot of people listening to this probably know who he is, the Manchester striker. Um, he is not only amazing on the pitch, but what he's doing off the pitch is probably so much better. So Marcus and Burberry, I think that's a British luxury fashion house. If I that's what I got from that. But anyway, they combined to help end child food poverty in the UK by donating to FareShare, which funds over 200,000 meals distributed through thousands of charities across Great Britain, feeding thousands of hungry kids and impoverished neighborhoods, low-income communities, making sure these kids have food to eat. And they're working on building youth centers in these low-income areas. Just so many good things that he's using his platform for. The man is only 22 years old, yet he understands his platform. He's using it to make the world better for underprivileged. And I just love what he's doing, and I thought he deserved a shout-out for that.
It's amazing. As a global fitness influencer, why are you nervous about going back to the gym?
So I'm kind of a hypocrite because even though I'm nervous about going back to the gym, I'm still going to the gym. I'm just very careful. So what I've noticed is that, cases are on the rise. And the only difference is that we're just not shutting down anything. So we're still full head of steam. So the gyms are gradually seeing increases in their membership again. People are starting to come back. And I think last week for me stuck out to me because for the first time in the gym, I felt like there was no space for anything. That's how many people were in there. And I felt like it was back to pre-COVID, pre-shutdown, pre-restrictions. And it makes me nervous because, when you think of the gym and you think of how the virus spreads, there's a lot of huffing and puffing in the gym, and it's not required, and at least in the gym I have attended, it's not required to have a face mask on the floor, like when you're actually lifting. When you come in and you come out, and when you're in common areas, you have to have one on. But when you're not actually lifting or you're running or biking or whatever you're doing, when you're huffing and puffing and all that aerosol is spraying out, like, it makes me a little nervous. But I'll go be honest with you. Like, I'm expecting a big, especially we're coming to fall season, the flu season. It's gonna get colder. There's gonna probably be more people in the gym now because it's not as much. The weather is not as great to be outside. And look, it makes me nervous. So I'm wearing my mask everywhere I go in the gym. I don't care where I am. That my mask is on. I know it's supposed to. I know the mask is more so to prevent you from giving it to other people, but I feel safer with it. I try to keep my distance from people who are in the gym. If someone's near me, I go away. I keep my space. But I will be honest, it's going to make me nervous because, again, people are going to get sick, whether it be flu or cold or COVID, even COVID. Like, that's going to spread somehow. And I think it's just we're in dangerous territory. So yeah, I'm a little nervous about that.
Point well taken. Thank you for listening. Please contact fitnessc@imf.org to let us know what you'd like to learn about the latest in sports news and your audio health, wellness, and fitness needs.